All right, everyone, Soros is panicked. All reports are saying that his trip to Davos was a panic mission. It's time for the globalists of the world to come together to try to defeat President Trump in his reelection, or else Soros's globalist world order is done. It's through. We're going to take a look at what he said and why, despite all his hopes to the contrary, it's all too little too late. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to your daily white pill of encouragement. I post 2 videos a day analyzing current events in light of super awesome conservative trends so you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. So if you haven't already done so, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You are not going to want to miss a single video analyzing the inevitable collapse of globalism and the unstoppable rise of a new conservative age, and nothing signals that age more than a very, very disappointed George Soros. But before we dive into all of that, let's give you a shout out to the sponsors of this video, and that's our very, very good friends over at My Patriot Supply. My Patriot Supply food kits last up to 25 years in storage, and they include breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And if you act now, you'll save 40% on a 2-week emergency food kit when you go to my special website by clicking on the link below. Now, this is a limited time offer, so don't wait for an emergency to happen before you to respond to one like George Soros. Take action by clicking on the link below. Save 40% off with your 2-week emergency food kit today. All right, so yes, the ultra-leftist billionaire George Soros, who Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban calls the world's chief oligarch, was attending the World Economic Forum this week in Davos, Switzerland, and he's reported to have lashed out at President Trump during a private dinner event where he said that the 2020 election will determine, in his words, the fate of the world. Now, according to CNBC and Breitbart, Soros claimed that President Trump is a con man, he's a narcissist who wants the world to revolve around him. I kid you not, this is this is George Soros complaining about someone else, not describing himself. But he went on to argue that after becoming president, Trump's already inflated ego transformed into what Soros called a malignant disease, and that Trump is in effect collapsing the world order that Soros and others have spent so much of their lives and their fortunes building up. Now, this tirade by Soros was, of course, in response to Trump's own speech that he gave in Davos, where he celebrated nationalist populism as the wave of the future, particularly in terms of its economic promise. You recall that Trump touted the massive energy independence and business boom that's been going on here in the United States. We put up a chart on our community of this channel, which shows the average unemployment rate under each of the last successive presidencies since Ronald Reagan. And what they found was that the unemployment average for Trump in his first 3 years in office is the lowest unemployment average ever, 3.9%. Compare that to the 9% under Obama or the 6.2% under Clinton, 3.9%. So Trump's there at Davos, trumpeting the American economic boom, which he calls by easing regulations, lowering taxes. Forbes actually published an article a couple of months back detailing how 314,000 more manufacturing jobs were added under Trump than under Obama. And as a result, the unemployment level for the manufacturing sector here in the United States is currently under 3%, which is the lowest ever recorded, again, ever. You have to let these evers hit you. The U.S. unemployment rate as a whole has held steady over the last year at around 3.5% as of December 2019, remaining at its lowest level since 1969. Trump's already added over 7 million jobs since taking office in January 2017. So Trump's coming to Davos, touting America's energy independence, its economic boom, touting the lowest unemployment numbers in our history. He's definitely had a stride there. And so again, like the video we just uploaded, contrasting Trump's optimistic vision of economic nationalism with the doom and gloom and whining and complaining that we heard from Greta Thunberg. How dare you, right? You could check that video out by clicking on the link above. I'll link it down below for you in the pinned comments section as well for your reference. Because the contrast between the doom and the gloom on the one hand and the optimistic, forward-looking vision of Trump, that was amplified by the apocalyptic outlook of George Soros. Now, this isn't the first time Soros has made dire comments like this at Davos. Last year, Soros, or 2019, he said something very similar at a dinner about the very survival of civilization being at stake because of Trump. Now, by civilization, he meant his secularized globalist civilization is at stake, not Western civilization. If anything, that's precisely what the new nationalist populist movements are trying to restore, Western civilization. But Soros admitted at last year's Economic Forum that the entire globalist world order is in danger of crashing. And this kind of talk became rather common for him throughout the past year. National Public Radio recently had a fascinating interview with Soros. And in that interview, Soros admitted that the ongoing Brexit saga, which at the time he thought he was winning, right? You all know that Soros was pumping money into the whole Brexit fiasco. He was giving over £500,000 to Best for Britain, which at the time was a pro-Remainer organization. And now, of course, they're defunct because Brexit has been ratified and Britain is on its way out of the EU, right? Don't ever forget. Soros believed he was going to win the whole Brexit issue. He believed he was going to effectively thwart the will of over 17 million Brits. Ha ha! But in this interview, he admitted that just the fact that he had to keep quelling these populist uprisings like Brexit in Britain or the Trump phenomenon in the United States, Soros admitted that these populist movements popping up everywhere were effectively breaking up the globalist world order that he's instrumentally helped to orchestrate. And so what he said was that when he first got involved in politics 40 years ago, what he calls the open society, this is globalism 101, right? Globalism opens societies and wrenches them away from their nativist sentiments and traditions and the like. He said it was winning everywhere. Societies were opening up to this great, glorious globalist future. And now, 40 years later, Soros's open societies are on the defensive or outright collapsing. And so in the NPR interview, he admitted that the world is indeed turning against him. And as such, he's realizing that the world order he's helped create is beginning to collapse. That's certainly how Soros has interpreted Brexit. He sees Brexit as the beginning of the end. He wrote an op-ed in the publication Market Watch several months back regarding the necessity of thwarting a successful Brexit. And he argued that Remainers, those who voted to remain in the EU, Remainers have to do everything they possibly can at their disposal to prevent a successful Brexit. What Soros did in that article is he actually made a bit of a faux pas, whether he realized it or not. We've talked about this before. He warned British Remainers that if they don't act decisively, eventually the European Union, I'm not kidding, he actually said this, the European Union will go the way of the Soviet Union. Not realizing, of course, that many of us believe the EU is the new Soviet Union, the new Marxist dictators who refuse to allow sovereign nations to live in accordance with their own sovereign wishes, right? It really is an admission here that Soros knows that Brexit is the beginning of the end of the globalist world order centered in Brussels. Soros here is echoing Guy Verhofstadt, who is the chief negotiator for Brexit, representing the EU in Brussels. And we now know that Guy Verhofstadt has said publicly that a successful Brexit would in effect eventually implode the EU. We know that he thinks that. That's why they work so hard to destroy Brexit. Both Soros and the major players in Brussels believe that a successful Brexit is the beginning of the end of the EU. And this brings us back to 2020. It appears now that for Soros, the 2020 election here in the States is it. It all comes down to this. With a successful Brexit, the only possible way of stopping the dismantling of this globalist order is to once and for all stop President Trump. Now, if I recall, Soros said he liked Elizabeth Warren. To my knowledge, he hasn't endorsed any of the Democrats as of yet. But, maybe he can endorse two like the New York Times does. But yeah, Soros sees 2020 as it. That's his Waterloo. As far as Soros is concerned, if Trump wins 2020 and a post-Brexit world finally begins to take shape, I don't think he sees any recovery from that. A post-Brexit world largely steered by a Trump reelection will effectively turn worldwide trends away from globalism and towards a new conservative age, an age where Soros will have little place, if any, at all. Now, before you go, you'll definitely want to check out our latest video on the UK finally clearing the Brexit finish line. The Queen has signed the Brexit agreement, and we are now just 1 week away from a full and clean break from the EU. And so what I do is I go over what to expect over the next week and the upcoming months as Britain once again recovers her national sovereignty. I think it'll absolutely make your day. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.